Your decision to assault was precise, calculated, manipulative, devious, despicable. I don't have to add words because your survivors have said all of that. I don't want to repeat it. Sir, you do not deserve to walk outside of a prison ever again. You have done nothing to control those urges, and anywhere you walk, destruction will occur. I'm giving you 175 years, which is 2,100 months. I've just signed your death warrant.
Welcome to SI Now. I'm Madeline Burke. He's Robin Lundberg. And that was the voice of Rosemary Aquilina, the judge who sentenced former Team USA and Michigan State gymnastics Dr. Larry Nassar to 40 to 175 years in prison after Nassar pleaded guilty to criminal sexual conduct. Now, Nassar abused more than 150 women and girls, including Olympic gold medalist Aly Raisman and Simone Biles.
Michigan State President Lou Anna Simon has also stepped down in the wake of the scandal, saying in part, "The last year and a half has been very difficult for the victims of Larry Nassar, for the university community, and for me personally. To the survivors, I can never say enough that I am so sorry that a trusted, renowned physician was really such an evil, evil person who inflicted such harm under the guise of medical treatment. As tragedies are politicized, blame is inevitable. As president, it is only natural that I am the focus of this anger. Throughout my career, I've worked very hard to put Team MSU first. I've tried to make it not about me. Therefore, I am tendering my resignation as president." Madeline, what's going through your head after seeing all of this unfold?
Well, first of all, she's right. It's not about her. It is about Larry Nassar, who I'm very happy to see that he was brought to justice. I mean, 168 women and girls told their stories, had their statements read. This is just the beginning. I mean, when you think about it, of those 168 women, how many didn't have their statements read? How many weren't able to speak out? How many weren't brave enough or strong enough to speak on a public forum and to admit, this has happened to me too? I'd be hard-pressed to find a female I know that something comparable like this hasn't happened to, myself included, and it's just ridiculous. Judge Aquilina pointed out in the courtroom yesterday, the National Crime Victimization Survey done annually by the Justice Department says 310 out of every 1,000 assaults are reported to police, which means 2 of every 3 go unreported. And this does not include children under 10 years old. So statistically, 1 in 10 children under the age of 10 will be sexually abused by their 18th birthday. There are more Larry Nassars in the world. When your daughters or your sons or your friends or your colleagues or your students say something, this needs to be taken seriously, because not everyone has the stage of being an Olympic athlete, and not everyone is in the spotlight of USA Gymnastics and Team Doctor to be known like this. Some people just need to be called out and held responsible for the actions.
One would hope that this sort of thing can help prevent other atrocities like this in the future. One would hope that being able to speak it out loud would help some of the victims move past this. But a lot of everything that's transpired in recent days and statements you've seen from committees or universities, to me, is just reacting to this being in the news, because this cannot be undone. The damage that took place cannot be undone. It's a tragedy, an atrocity, whatever word you want to use. It's why some of the phrases and quotes have endured for so long, like silence is complicity, or the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing, because all of us seem to have the same reaction. How could something like this be allowed to continue and be perpetrated for so long?
Yeah, and so many of the victims' statements and the survivors' statements said that, I mentioned this, I told this to this person, and this person, and it took a lot of people and a lot of ears to get this elevated to the level of accountability. Now, in a letter to the judge, Nassar claimed that the media convinced the women that they were abused and that his abuse was medical treatment. She read parts of his letter that seemed to be unapologetic, narcissistic, and kind of a victim mentality from the point of view of Nassar, including saying, quote, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned." to which the courtroom was audibly shocked. I mean, what was your impression of that?
I don't want to dignify what this guy is saying or how this guy feels in the moment. We've seen what he's done. I mean, the judge pressed him, are you changing your plea? And he says, no, the guilty plea is in. This is... I keep searching for the words, right? Atrocity and tragedy, and what he did is unforgivable, and it's not the kind of thing, no matter what he says, no matter what he does, where I'm going to sit here and find sympathy or say, oh, you know what, there's some validity to his side of the story here.
Yeah, there's no sympathy, there's no mistake. This was going on for years, for decades, and it's clear even at this point, even after hearing from all of these survivors, that he doesn't see what's wrong with it. But for more on the legal aspect of all of this, we bring in SI legal analyst Michael McCann. Nassar was sentenced to 40 to 175 years in prison. This on top of 60 years in federal prison for child pornography charges. He said that he will not appeal this. Now, at 54 years old, he'll clearly spend the rest of his life behind bars. As Judge Aquilina said, I've signed your death warrant. Why not just give him life in prison?
Well, it's because of the plea agreement that he had struck with prosecutors, that she was bound to follow the agreement. In addition, the types of charges that were in place, coupled with the plea agreement, really constrained her in terms of what she could do. And she acknowledged that in her words, where she said, I will honor the agreement that you struck. Nonetheless, she chose, and I think many would agree, the right move to impose the maximum within that discretion. So, and look, as you mentioned, it's tantamount to a life sentence. He has a 60-year federal sentence, and then he's going to have 175-year state, and then he'll also be sentenced later in the month to more state charges in Michigan, and he's being investigated in Texas. I mean, he's going to end up probably with maybe over 300 years of prison. So it is essentially a life sentence.
As was just mentioned, Judge Aquilina said, I just signed your death warrant upon issuing Nassar's sentence. I personally have no issue with it, but thought it was noteworthy how strong her personal denouncement was. How typical is it for a judge to speak in such terms?
Yeah, I've never heard a judge talk like that, to be honest. And I've heard a number of judges, including in sentencing, and that was by far the most dramatic language I've used in the sentence I've heard used in the sentencing of a convicted felon. She, I think, was clearly aware of what was going on, that there were people watching this across the country, and that she wanted to send a message that she was calling him out, that his excuses were simply ridiculous, really, some of the excuses that he's made. So I think she was aware of the moment. She was aware of the audience. And that affected her choice of words. I don't think she would have used that language with other defendants. Now, I've never seen her before in court. Maybe she's known for using this kind of verbiage, although that's not what I've heard about her. But yeah, Robin, it was certainly unusual, and I think many would find it good in a way that she called him out to send a message.
Now, both Michigan State and USA Gymnastics said they reported Nassar as soon as they learned of the abuse, but several victims claimed otherwise in their testimonies. Now, first, let's talk MSU. The NCAA sent a letter of inquiry to MSU on Tuesday, quote, regarding potential NCAA rules violations related to the assaults Larry Nassar perpetrated against young girls and young women, including some student athletes at Michigan State. Now, with many of the survivors saying they had notified several people before being taken seriously, does Michigan State have potential legal ramifications?
Definitely. Michigan State has been sued both in federal and state lawsuits over potential civil liability, basically for being negligent, that they hired this guy and they failed to monitor him adequately, that he was in a position of wrecking lives, right? This is a doctor. This is someone who used Michigan State facilities. This is someone who used the Michigan State status of being a professor there. And they had some obligation to realize what was going on. How could this go on for decades without any accountability? And as you mentioned, there were complaints. And one of the accusers has said that she complained and she was told, oh, no, this is just a medical procedure. I mean, that's really unacceptable. And it could be more than just unacceptable, it could be unlawful. If in fact the university was negligent in how they monitored him and also in failing to report crimes. That's another aspect to the cases against the school. So the school could be potentially have to pay out many millions of dollars. And it wouldn't surprise me if this litigation ends in a settlement where the university has to be careful here, because if the litigation process plays out, evidence will be found, testimony will be taken. Individuals at the school, both currently at the school and previously at the school, could not only be in civil liability, they may end up in criminal trouble. So these are litigations that I think the university will be poised to try to settle.
Now, what's the difference between the criminal and the civil suits here? Could this land people behind bars?
It could. Now, the civil suits have a lower threshold. It's preponderance of evidence, or more likely than not. Whereas the criminal, if they were criminally charged, there would have to be a specific statute that relates to a crime, such as failure to report, for instance. That can be a crime. In terms of their custodial responsibility of children, that can lead to a crime. There, though, there would have to be beyond a reasonable doubt of guilt. So the standard is much higher. But in Penn State, we saw 3 officials charged and ultimately convicted, although not on all of the charges, but on some of them. So there we're seeing an instance where individuals at an institution, because they didn't report a crime, ended up being convicted of crimes. Not that we're going to necessarily see that here. I don't want to predict that because we don't know all the facts, but this storyline could play out in that direction.
Now, President Lou Anna Simon resigned in the wake of this. Is she liable as the head of the institution if she didn't specifically know what was going on?
Yeah, potentially. She may have had an obligation to know what was going on. Even if she didn't know specifically, she may have had a legal duty to take steps to find out. And we'll find out if, in fact, she took reasonable steps in looking at how one of her employees was acting. I mean, he was a professor. This is someone who reports to a department chair, who reports to an academic dean, who reports to a provost, who reports to the president. There's a chain of command in a university. And the lawsuits against Michigan State will really illuminate how that chain of command worked at Michigan State and who ought to have known what was going on and who may have known and didn't take steps.
Let's turn to Team USA. Allie Raceman gave perhaps one of the most powerful statements, not only recounting the effect of Nassar's abuse, but the inaction of USA Gymnastics. Here's what she said.
To believe in the future of gymnastics is to believe in change. But how are we to believe in change when these organizations aren't even willing to acknowledge the problem? It's easy to put out statements talking about how athlete care is the highest priority. But they've been saying that for years, and all the while this nightmare was happening. And even now, after all that has happened, USA Gymnastics has the nerve to say the very same things it has said all along. Can't you see how disrespectful that is? Can't you see how much that hurts? USA Gymnastics, where is the honesty? Where is the transparency? Why must the manipulation continue?
Should we expect to see any members of U.S. Gymnastics criminally prosecuted?
It's certainly possible. It will come down to whether they knew of wrongdoing and failed to take adequate steps to report it and stop it. We don't know if that's the case yet, but it's conceivable that individuals at USA Gymnastics could be charged with crimes. We'll have to see if, in fact, evidence plays out that leads in that direction, but yes, it's possible.
Now, we've talked about Michigan State and U.S. Gymnastics as well as some individuals here. Going forward, do you see or expect to see more fallout for institutions or individuals?
Yeah, I think we will see universities in general look at this situation and say, how could this happen? Michigan State's a very good school. It's a big university. A lot of schools can sort of relate to Michigan State. How could this have been going on for so long without any detectability, or if it was detected, why weren't steps taken to stop it? And I think it, of course, it invites the question, you know, if there's a monster at Michigan State, could there be a monster at other schools? Child molesters, we know, unfortunately, are not so uncommon that there might be one at a college. There might be other colleges that have persons like this. persons who might be in contact with young people. And I think schools have to think critically about how to come up with policies that ensure there's adequate supervision of faculty and other officials that are within the sort of reasonable grounds of privacy. But I think schools have a duty to make sure that professors and others who are interacting with young persons, especially faculty who are medical or training in terms of medicine. I mean, he's in such a position of authority. He's a doctor. He's treating people who are young, who are in pain, just literally the worst dynamics possible. In dynamics like that, should the law be more scrutinizing? Should universities have greater policies in place? So I think we'll see schools talk about that.
Michael McCann, thank you so much for your legal insight on this story.
Thank you.
All-star selections still have the NBA buzzing, leading to a number of noteworthy quotes from said stars. We're going to run through some, generating attention, and decide whether to take them or leave them. First, Damian Lillard took a shot back at Russell Westbrook, who bemoaned players complaining about being snubbed until they get in, which many people interpreted as a veiled jab at Dame. Lillard certainly agreed with that assessment, saying, quote, "I respect Russ a lot, so it was kind of disappointing to see him say that because he's played against me, he's played against our team, he knows what I've accomplished, not just this year, but over my career. So it was a little bit disappointing, but I know that I earned my spot this year, and that's pretty much what it is. I earned my spot." You taking or leaving those comments, Madeline?
I'll take it. I think Dame did earn his spot. I mean, this isn't the first time he's an All-Star. This is the third time he's an All-Star. Last time was 2015. 2016, Damian Lillard was the biggest snub. 2017, Damian Lillard was the biggest snub. 2018, Damian Lillard makes the ballot, and now, oh, he shouldn't have been in. He's in because he's complaining about getting snubbed. I think it's more that he's a bubble guy. You know, if Lillard wasn't in and Paul George was in instead, we'd still be talking. I can't believe Damian Lillard still can't get the All-Star nod. He does deserve to be an All-Star, but that doesn't mean these other guys don't. It's just a certain roster. It's like last man in, last man out. He's a bubble guy. He got it this year.
Yeah, I'm taking him too, just because there's no reason to call him out individually. I could make the case that George deserves to be on the team over Lillard, you know, and then the meme would be about Lillard getting snubbed, as you mentioned. And it really says more about the talent in the NBA than anything, I think. The fact that Damian Lillard is a fringe all-star every single year. You have to think about a guy who's capable of taking over games, capable of being a killer in the clutch, and yet you're like, oh, wait, is he even one of the 20 or so best players in this super talented league?
Right, and perhaps they maybe even need to think about just expanding the list to get these guys in. But Russell Westbrook went to bat for his teammate Paul George after PG-13 didn't get the All-Star nod. And George reacted to that, saying, quote, "Russ is the reason why this decision is becoming even easier to make. It's the character Russ has. He's a stand-up guy, and he has his teammates back." Now, take it or leave it. Paul George will remain with the Thunder after this quote.
I'm taking it. This is one of the most revealing quotes I think I've seen. I mean, generally when guys are asked about their free agency status, they say, you know what, I'm focused on this year. We'll deal with that in the offseason. We've seen that from Durant. We've seen that from LeBron, so on and so forth. Paul George wasn't even asked about that. Paul George was asked about Russell Westbrook having his back, and he volunteered that his decision is now getting easier. So I see that team getting better. I see George getting acclimated to playing in OKC, and he was never the kind of star that needed to be the lead dog on a team. So he can fall back a little bit with the way Russell Westbrook plays, unlike maybe Durant, who thought his, portion of the ball handling wasn't up to snuff. And I think these are very revealing comments from George.
Well, and for years, Paul George said he wanted to go play for the Lakers because he's from LA. The Lakers are his hometown team. But Russell Westbrook, also from LA. These guys have that in common. They're playing well together. They're getting along well as teammates. Oklahoma City could be the LA of the Midwest.
Unless they both go to LA, which I doubt happens. Mike D'Antoni and James Harden, we're talking about everybody having other players' backs. They have Chris Paul's back, as they were not happy CP3 didn't make the team, with D'Antoni saying, quote, "I was amazed that people should be watching games, don't watch the games and see how important a guy is. He's for all the right things, gave up space and personal accolades to make the team better. He did that and is still having one of his better years, a career year. It's perplexing." And Harden added, second best overall record in the NBA, number 2 in the best conference in the league, averages what, 19 points and 9 assists? I mean, what are we rewarding? Taking or leaving this defensive Paul?
I will take the defense of Paul from their perspective in that, yes, they are right. Chris Paul has fit in instead of fit out. He's evolved his game to fit with this Rockets team and this style of play. He's having a career. He's playing very well, but he missed 17 of 45 games prior to the All-Star selections. That, I think, played into it, and especially when you're considering a short roster. Again, guys like Damian Lillard and Paul George and the on-the-bubble guys, when there are so few people that get in and you have to make a cut, I think not being available, not being out there on the court, it's just like the same argument last year when people were saying Joel Embiid should not be Rookie of the Year because of his limited amount of play. This is the same thing. You know, Chris Paul has played well, but he's played in 2/3 of the games that they're getting these stats from.
100%. I'm leaving these comments. Chris Paul is a better basketball player than Damian Lillard. He's a better basketball player than almost anybody in the league. I mean, I still think he's a top 10 guy when he's healthy, but he hasn't been healthy. And when you're making these sort of selections, missing that much of a chunk of the season is a valid reason to pick someone like Lillard over someone like Paul.
All right, other headlines in the NBA. The NBA supports legalized betting, but the league wants a cut. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver has said in the past that he believes gambling on the association should be legal. There are a lot of hoops to jump through in order for this to come to fruition, but according to reports, the NBA wants 1% of every bet made on its games, in addition to other regulations, a request that could create massive revenue for the NBA and other sports leagues in the future. You with this or you against it?
I'm totally with it. I mean, I think legalizing sports gambling should be inevitable, or is inevitable, and should be happening right now. I mean, it can add intrigue. Adam Silver has been ahead on this topic, thinking about the interest that is put on a random game on a Thursday.
Right.
How about that? You know, and you put a little money on it and you might want to watch it. As far as the 1% that the NBA is trying to take, well, of course, they're trying to create a new revenue stream. It's basically a convenience charge. I don't know about you. Do you go to your own bank's ATM if the bank is 4 blocks away and you're at one that might charge you $2? Sometimes you just pay the $2 for the convenience. So the NBA is banking on that, especially, I think, if it can be at the forefront of this sort of movement.
Well, and people are going to bet on games if they want to bet on games. I mean, people play fantasy, people play daily fantasy, people are going to place their bets. And, you know, I think that's just kind of, it's going to happen. You might as well get involved and make it regulated and make it fair.
Speaking of gambling, the Eagles entered the Super Bowl as the heaviest underdog since 2009. But that didn't stop one bettor from putting a heavy wager on the Birds, as according to MGM, a multi-million-dollar bet was put on Philadelphia. Good bet?
If you've got multiple millions of dollars to bet on the Birds, that's a lot of dollars. And, you know, it's not clear if he bet money line or straight up. Either way, though, that's a huge bet to make. So I don't know. I mean, if he's going to win big. If he's going to lose, he's going to go down being like, I believed in the underdogs. I mean, the Eagles are playing up this underdog role a lot. They are really owning it. And if he's got those odds and he translates that into, you know, buying himself a yacht, good for him.
Well, my rule of thumb was never pick against the Patriots. Last week, I picked against the Patriots and took the Jaguars. So now I don't know if I can ever pick against the Patriots again. However, I do think the Eagles are a better team than New England, and I feel better about their chances in this game because this bettor put so much money on them to take the dub.
Well, and if you took the spread, they don't even need to take the dub. They just need to cover.
Yeah, well, you can give me a cut if you
There
want.
you go.
I'm calling to let you know that the baseball writers have elected you to the National Baseball Hall of Fame. Congratulations.
Oh my gosh, I don't know what to say. This is just an honor.
Sometimes it takes a little longer than it should, but you're where you belong right now, my friend.
I do appreciate that. I'm surrounded by a lot of family and friends, and they've been listening to you, and like everybody's pretty excited. That's
Wrong number.
The class is set. Chipper Jones, Trevor Hoffman, Jim Thome, and Vladimir Guerrero have been voted into the Baseball Hall of Fame, joining Jack Morris and Alan Trammell, who were elected by the Modern Era Committee. For more, we turn to SI's Jay Jaffe to go more in depth on this class. Jay, 6 guys getting in this year. Where does this class stack up all time?
Well, it's an impressive class. I mean, just in 2014, I believe there were a total of 6 guys elected by the between the writers, who elected 3, and the era committee, which elected 3 managers. This is having 6 players go in. It's been a while since we've had that many. The quartet of honorees this year is the 4th in electoral history and the 2nd since 2015, when Craig Biggio, John Smoltz, Pedro Martinez, and Randy Johnson were all elected in the same year. It's a pretty great class, and certainly a lot of great memories from these guys.
Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens' vote totals slightly increased from a year ago. Next year is their 7th year on the ballot. Based on this year's voting, are you more worried that they won't get in, or do you see them getting the necessary votes?
I see them getting in, but it's going to be in year 9 or 10. They're advancing slowly. It's not very impressive what they, as far as moving up just 3 points. But last year was the first year that they got above 50%. They survived the direct blast of the Joe Morgan letter from the vice chairman of the Hall of Fame, pleading with voters. That seems to have fallen on deaf ears. And I think while there's some people who believe that this spells the end of their chances, we're in the 6th reel of a 10-reel film here. If you look at the results relative, as far as what was in the Ryan Thibodeau's tracker and for the previously published ballots and the unpublished ballots, what's interesting to me is while they got about the same total number of votes as last year, the number of no's decreased, more or less with the decline in total ballots from 442 to 422. I'm crunching the numbers for my SI piece that'll go up later today. Every one of those no votes requires 3 votes to offset. So if the net effect is to disappear about 20 guys or gals, whoever, 20 voters who are choosing against them, that works in their favor. It's also worth noting that over the last 2 years, 24 out of 26 first-time voters have included Clemens on their ballot. 23 out of 26 have included Bonds. So between those 2 trends, I think they'll continue to gain several points a year and get to 75% by 2022, their final year on the ballot.
Now, who are your locks to get into the Hall for 2019, next year?
Well, I think Mariano Rivera, a first-time candidate, is a lock. And Edgar Martinez, who got 70.4% this year, his 9th year of eligibility, he'll be in the 10th year on the ballot. I think it's really cool that the pair could go in together. They're the ultimate specialists. Mariano's the best closer in the game's history. Edgar Martinez is the best designated hitter in the game's history. And Rivera called Martinez, who went 11 for 19 against him in his career, the toughest batter he ever faced. So I think it's great to see those 2 likely to go in together.
Roy Halladay will be on the ballot for the first time in 2019, a tragedy for the baseball community, of course, when he died in a fatal plane crash this past November. He's 6th on your JAWS system going into next year's ballot. Do you see Halladay getting in?
I think he's got a very good chance. With the 2 Cy Young Awards and the 2 no-hitters in his career, which was, I guess, a little bit short by some Hall of Fame standards, fewer than 3,000 innings, I think he would have been a candidate who took maybe 2 or 3 years to win voters over had this tragedy not occurred. I think now there's an emotional pull there that I believe is probably going to accelerate his timeline, and he could join Edgar and Mariano posthumously, of course. It'll be a bittersweet moment, but I do think he belongs in the Hall of Fame.
Jay, appreciate your time. Get back to crunching those numbers, man.
All right, sounds good. Thanks a lot.
That'll do it for us here on SI Now Live today. Make sure you check us out tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. In the meantime, for all the latest videos and updates, follow at SI Now Live on Twitter. Bonds and Clemens still not in.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, that asterisk.
They shouldn't have a Hall of Fame if Barry Bonds isn't in it. Come on.
They should have an asterisk Hall of Fame.